Even now, when I stroll by my front entrance and catch that metallic glint of reinforced steel, I find myself doing a double take. I must have shattered every record for the most excessive reaction to an intrusive neighbor in recorded history. Yet I can honestly say it was worth every dollar spent, every aching back muscle, and every confused expression from the delivery crews. You're probably wondering how I arrived at this point. How did someone like me, a relatively reserved, decidedly private person, end up mounting what essentially amounts to a fortress door on my residential property? Well, buckle up because this tale is absolutely wild. And it all began when my homeowners association and chairwoman, whose domineering nature matched the intensity of her cologne, decided she had the authority to determine what shade my bedroom linens should be. Leave a comment and tell me your location, because you won't believe the nerve that triggered this entire saga. Everything started innocently enough, or at least appeared that way when I relocated to the prestigious Meadowbrook Gardens community. I purchased the property for its peaceful cul-de-sac, the established landscaping, and its proximity to a small wildlife sanctuary.
What I failed to adequately consider was Patricia Wellington, HOA chairwoman extraordinaire, sovereign of her own miniature kingdom, and the individual who apparently believed her authority extended into my very essence, or at minimum into my family room. Patricia was, to phrase it diplomatically, quite a personality. Imagine someone in her early 50s perpetually dressed in immaculately coordinated outfits that announced, "Observe my financial freedom," while simultaneously whispering, "My taste is questionable." Her hair was a rigidly sculpted helmet resistant to weather or logic, and she operated a pristine white SUV so massive it likely required its own postal code, which she maneuvered through our narrow residential lanes with the entitled aggression of a military vehicle operator. My initial confrontation involved the variety of petunias I'd planted in my front garden bed. Apparently, Burgundy Beauty wasn't among the sanctioned options of Cardinal Fire or Crimson Glory. I received an extremely official-looking correspondence complete with a poorly duplicated colour chart informing me of my serious horticultural violation. I work as an engineer, a solution finder, someone who operates within logic and precise standards. I studied the HOA regulations, all 300 tedious pages, and located the applicable yet surprisingly ambiguous section regarding coordinated planting arrangements. I responded with a courteous reference letter, highlighting the vagueness and the subjective interpretation of coordinated, while including technical specifications for Burgundy Beauty, emphasizing its disease resistance. Surely a neighborhood advantage? That, I believe, was my initial error.
Patricia despised logic. She preferred obedience. She particularly detested when you demonstrated you'd actually studied the regulations she clearly hadn't mastered beyond her personal understanding of them. She expected you to tremble, apologize, and eliminate the offending plants.
My composed, evidence-based reply seemed to malfunction something in her mental circuitry. She didn't respond directly to my correspondence. Instead, the penalties began. $5 daily for non-compliant petunias. I paid the first assessment, then submitted another letter stating I was paying under objection, and restated my position. The second penalty arrived, now $10 daily. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with a reasonable administrator, but a minor dictator. My neighbors, primarily elderly residents who'd lived here for decades, simply shrugged and advised me it was simpler to accommodate Patricia. "She becomes like this," elderly Mr. Thompson from across the way told me one evening, glancing over his precisely manicured hedges.
Exhausts you, she does. Better to just plant the red variety, young man. But something within me, that engineering obstinacy perhaps, simply couldn't surrender. This wasn't about the petunias anymore. This was about principle. This was about a grown woman in a position of minor, extremely localized power who was behaving like a feudal ruler.
The next assault targeted my mailbox. It was the original fixture, completely functional, standard black, but apparently it lacked a certain distinction that Patricia's recently modified regulations, passed with her board of sycophants approving it, I later discovered, now required. This time it concerned a brass flag, not the existing silver one. Another letter, another penalty, this one beginning at $20. I researched replacing the flag. It was a $30 component, but again, it was the audacity, the pure arbitrary nature of it all. This continued for months, a slow intensifying conflict of passive aggression and official-looking correspondence. I'd investigate, I'd compose meticulously polite and legally sound responses, sometimes referencing specific HOA codes back at her that she'd obviously missed or misunderstood, or even sections that directly contradicted her new modifications. She'd simply create new regulations or escalate the penalties, her letters becoming increasingly unhinged, filled with capitalized text and exclamation marks. She even attempted to penalize me for the style of bird feeder I maintained, claiming it attracted undesirable avian elements. I'm not joking. I had a small basic feeder for chickadees and nuthatches. What did she prefer? Hawks exclusively. The breaking point, the incident that launched 1,000 tons of steel, metaphorically speaking, though eventually quite literally, was her grand declaration about interior design consistency. It started subtly. Patricia began making observations during her neighborhood patrols, which involved her slowly cruising in her oversized SUV, window lowered, sunglasses positioned on her nose, surveying properties like a naval captain searching for enemy vessels. She'd make pointed comments to my neighbors loud enough for me to hear if I was outside about how certain people obviously didn't comprehend that community standards extended beyond the front landscaping. There were murmurs, then fresh gossip that Patricia was attempting to get the board to authorize inspections, actual interior inspections of homes to ensure decorative harmony and prevent unsightly internal deterioration that might impact collective property values. Most residents dismissed it as Patricia being Patricia, another one of her power-hungry delusions. I should have been more vigilant. I was organising a brief vacation, just 1 week, to visit my brother. I'd requested Mr. Thompson to monitor the property, collect my mail. I verified all the locks, activated the security system. Standard protocol. When I returned, pulling into my driveway feeling relaxed and rejuvenated, I noticed the first strange thing. A small scratch near the deadbolt on my front door, almost like a tool mark. I dismissed it. Probably just me being careless with my keys previously. I inserted my key in the lock. It wouldn't turn. I frowned.
Attempted again. Nothing. It went in, but wouldn't engage. Irritation began building. Had the lock mechanism failed while I was away? I tried the handle lock. Same result. My key, my house key that I'd used just 7 days earlier, no longer functioned on my own front door. A cold knot of anxiety began forming in my stomach.
This wasn't a seized mechanism. This felt intentional. I walked around to the rear door. Identical situation. My keys were worthless. My heart was pounding now. Had I been burglarized? But everything appeared undisturbed from the exterior. Windows were secure. No evidence of forced entry beyond that tiny scratch. My mind raced. What on earth was happening? I contacted Mr. Thompson. He rushed over, worry written across his face. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. I explained the key situation. He tried his backup, the one I'd provided him for emergencies. It didn't work either. "That's mighty strange," he mumbled, scratching his head. "Mighty strange indeed."
I haven't seen anyone near your front door. Except for, he paused, looking suddenly uncomfortable. Except for whom, Mr. Thompson? I pressed, that cold knot tightening. He shuffled his feet. Well, Patricia was around and there was a locksmith truck here day before yesterday. I just assumed you'd arranged for some work.
"Maybe lost your keys on your trip and called ahead." A locksmith? Patricia? The pieces assembled with horrifying, infuriating clarity. My HOA chairwoman, the petty tyrant of Meadowbrook Gardens, had changed the locks on my house while I was absent. The sheer unmitigated audacity of it was staggering. The violation, the absolute arrogance.
My initial shock was rapidly being consumed by a towering glacial fury. She hadn't just crossed a boundary, she'd obliterated it from existence, and she had no concept of who she was dealing with. She thought she was confronting a man who planted unauthorized petunias. She was about to discover she was facing a man who understood structural engineering, load-bearing calculations, and the beautiful, immutable physics of extremely thick steel. This wasn't just about petunias anymore. This was warfare, and I was going to construct a fortress. The realization struck me like a physical blow. This wasn't merely an intrusive neighbor. This was criminal behavior. She'd had my locks replaced. The very mechanisms I depended on for security, for privacy, for peace of mind. What had she done inside? Had she rifled through my personal possessions, my private documents, my life? The thought made my skin crawl, my blood boil with a rage so intense it was almost freezing. My immediate priority was regaining access to my own residence. I called a 24-hour locksmith, a different one, naturally. When he arrived, looking tired but professional, I explained the circumstances, trying to keep my voice steady, though internally I was a screaming volcano of indignation. I had my identification, my utility statements in my name for that address, my deed. I always maintained copies of crucial documents in my vehicle and digitally, a practice that was about to prove invaluable. The locksmith, a stocky gentleman named Sam, listened patiently, examined the locks, and whistled. Yeah, these are fresh. Pretty standard installation, but definitely new. You didn't authorize this? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Absolutely not, I said, my voice tense. I suspect my HOA chairwoman took it upon herself to do this while I was out of town. Sam blinked. Your HOA lady? That's breaking and entering, basically, and destruction of property if they damage the old ones, removing them. He shook his head. Heard some wild HOA stories, but this is unprecedented.
He got to work, and it took him a solid hour to bypass and then replace the brand new unauthorized locks that Patricia had presumptuously installed. As he worked, I walked around the perimeter, my earlier observations taking on a more sinister meaning. That tiny scratch marked by the deadbolt, a clumsy locksmith working for Patricia probably. Were there other marks? I felt like a detective at my own crime scene. The sheer boldness of it continued to astound me. What kind of individual believes they have the authority to do that? To violate someone's home, their sanctuary? When Sam finally got the door open, I almost hesitated to enter. I was afraid of what I might discover, or rather, what evidence of intrusion I'd encounter. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The air was stale, undisturbed. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. My mail, collected by Mr. Thompson, was in a neat stack on the kitchen counter, where he'd left it through the back door before the locks were changed again.
I walked through each room, my eyes scanning for anything amiss. It was a strange, unsettling feeling. Had she been in my bedroom, my office, my drawers? There were no obvious signs of disturbance, no ransacked furniture, no papers out of place, but there was a faint, almost imperceptible scent in the air that wasn't mine. It was a cloying, sweet, floral fragrance, Patricia's signature scent. My stomach churned. She had been in here, snooping, prowling, judging. I found it then on my entrance table, right where anyone entering would notice it, a crisp new envelope with the HOA logo. Inside was a letter typed on official HOA letterhead, signed by Patricia Wellington, chairwoman. It was a masterpiece of malicious, condescending jargon. It stated that pursuant to recently ratified neighborhood harmony protocols, protocols I'd never heard of, and which I suspected were invented spontaneously, a preliminary wellness and standards assessment had been performed on my property due to concerns regarding maintenance and adherence to community aesthetic guidelines, both external and internal. It continued to say that regrettably they had been unable to gain consensual access despite multiple attempts, a blatant lie. I hadn't received a single call or notice, and thus, in the interest of maintaining community standards and property values, they had secured the services of a professional locksmith to ensure the property's continued accessibility for necessary oversight.
It was so outrageous, so blatantly illegal, I almost laughed. Almost. The rage was still there, simmering beneath the shock. She'd essentially confessed in writing to breaking into my house. The letter concluded with a list of minor interior discrepancies noted, which included things like suboptimal color coordination in the guest bathroom.
It was blue and white, hardly offensive, an uninspired selection of window treatments in the living area. They were simple, functional blinds, and my personal favourite, a generally lacking sense of decorative flair. Decorative flair. She was penalising me for a lack of decorative flair. Attached was a bill for the locksmith she'd hired and a new set of penalties for these interior discrepancies. I crumpled the letter in my fist. This was beyond harassment. This was a declaration of war by a woman who clearly believed she was above the law, empowered by a flimsy HOA agreement, and a board of directors too spineless or too foolish to challenge her. My first call was to my attorney, Carol, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who'd helped me with my initial house purchase. I explained the situation, reading Patricia's letter word for word. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Carol let out a low whistle. "Mark," she said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and what I can only describe as legal excitement. She put it in writing. She actually admitted to arranging for your locks to be changed and entering your home without your permission to critique your curtains and guest bathroom's colour scheme.
I added, feeling a hysterical laugh bubble up. Right, Carol said. Okay, first, change your locks again immediately. Document everything, the letter, the new locks, any damage. Take photographs. Get a written statement from your locksmith Sam about the unauthorised lock change. Second, we're sending Miss Wellington and the entire HOA board a cease and desist letter that will make their hair curl. We're also exploring options for damages. This is illegal entry, trespass, potential conversion if they kept your old locks, harassment. Honestly, it's a buffet of legal wrongdoing. She continued, HOA bylaws, even the most restrictive ones, almost never grant the association the right to forcibly enter a private residence for aesthetic inspections, and certainly not by changing the locks. If there's a genuine emergency, a burst pipe flooding a neighbour, a fire, there might be provisions but decorative flair. That's not going to fly in any court of law. Hearing Carol's professional fury and her immediate grasp of the situation was incredibly validating. I wasn't insane. Patricia was out of control. Over the next few days, I meticulously gathered my evidence. I got a sworn affidavit from Sam detailing his findings and the work he performed. I took high-resolution photographs of Patricia's letter, the envelope, the faint marks on my doorframe from her locksmith. I even found a half-empty, ostentatiously branded water bottle her locksmith had left behind on my porch. Another small piece of evidence tying the act back to an external party hired for the job without my consent. I researched HOA law in my state until my eyes burned. While HOAs had powers, they were not unlimited. They could not supersede fundamental property rights or state and federal laws regarding trespass and illegal entry. Patricia's recently ratified neighbourhood harmony protocols were nowhere to be found in any official HOA documentation I had access to or could find on the community website. They were, as I suspected, a figment of her power-tripping imagination. Meanwhile, I had my own locksmith, a more security-conscious professional than Sam.
No offence to Sam, he was excellent in a pinch. Rekey all my doors with high-security Medeco locks. They were expensive, but peace of mind was becoming priceless. The new keys felt heavy and reassuring in my hand, but it wasn't enough. A new lock could be picked, or if Patricia was truly unhinged, bypassed again by another unauthorized locksmith, if she thought she could get away with it.
Her letter, her sheer audacity, had shown me she believed she could get away with anything. She believed she owned a part of my life, my home. That sense of violation lingered. Every time I walked into my house, I wondered where her eyes had roamed, what judgments she'd made. My home, my sanctuary, had been tainted by her intrusion. And the thought of her or anyone from the HOA believing they could just waltz in again whenever they pleased fueled a new kind of resolve. I needed something more, something definitive, something that screamed this far and no further, something that Patricia Wellington, with her oversized SUV and her undersized respect for personal property, would understand implicitly.
It was while researching high-security door options, initially thinking of reinforced steel doors, that the idea began to form. It was a wild idea, an absurd idea, an engineer's over-the-top solution to a human problem. But the more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. A bank vault door. Not a door like a bank vault door. An actual honest-to-goodness multi-ton reinforced steel multiple locking bolt bank vault door. The kind of door that laughs at locksmiths, that scoffs at crowbars, that would make Patricia Wellington's eyes water. The irony was delicious. She wanted access. She wanted to ensure standards. I'd give her a standard of security she couldn't possibly comprehend, let alone bypass.
The sheer unadulterated impracticality of it for a suburban home was part of its appeal. It was a statement, a monument to my unwillingness to be bullied. It was, in its own way, my ultimate act of decorative flair. And the best part, as far as I could tell from the HOA bylaws, after scrutinizing every single page again, there was absolutely nothing, not one word, about the type of front door you could have, as long as it was maintained in good repair and aesthetically harmonious, a term I was now prepared to argue with the same tenacity I'd previously reserved for petunias. What could be more in good repair than solid steel? And aesthetically harmonious? Well, aesthetics are subjective, aren't they, Patricia?
The decision to install a bank vault door on my suburban house wasn't one I took lightly. Okay, maybe I took it a little lightly, fueled by righteous indignation and a craving for theatrical overkill, but I also approached it with the meticulousness of an engineer. This couldn't just be a grand gesture, it had to be feasible, structurally sound, and importantly, something I could actually execute.
My house was a modern build, sturdy with a poured concrete foundation and steel reinforced framing in places, but retrofitting a door that weighed several tons was not a weekend DIY project. I spent weeks in a deep dive of research. I contacted specialist security firms, companies that dealt with commercial safes, bank installations, and even panic rooms. Most were understandably a bit bewildered when I explained I wanted this for the front entrance of my single family home in Meadowbrook Gardens. "Is this a high crime area, sir?" one salesman asked, his voice dripping with polite confusion. "Only if you consider an overzealous HOA chairwoman a crime syndicate," I muttered before clarifying. It was for enhanced personal security and peace of mind. I finally found a company based a few states over, Fortress Max Security Solutions, that didn't bat an eye. Their representative, a grizzled ex-military guy named Marcus, just said, "Sure, we can do that. You got the load-bearing capacity for the frame? What kind of locking mechanism you looking for? Timed, biometric, good old-fashioned combination?"
His nonchalance was refreshing. We talked specifications. I didn't need something that could withstand a shaped charge, but I wanted it to be unmistakably, undeniably a vault door. We settled on a custom-built model, slightly scaled down from their commercial offerings, but still monstrously impressive. 8-inch thick solid steel composite, multiple 1.5-inch hardened steel locking bolts, a classic circular crank handle, and a high security Sergeant Greenleaf combination lock with a secondary keyed Medico lock for day-to-day convenience, if you could call anything about this convenient. The door alone would weigh close to 2 tons.
The frame, which would need to be custom fabricated and deeply integrated into the existing structure of my house, would add significantly more. This led to the next phase, structural assessment. I hired an independent structural engineer, a quiet, methodical woman named Dr. Anna Sharma. She listened to my plan, looked at my house's original blueprints, and then spent a day tapping walls, taking measurements, and doing complex calculations on her laptop. Her initial expression was one of profound skepticism, but as she delved into the blueprints and saw the existing robust construction of the entryway, thankfully the original architect had a similar penchant for over-engineering certain aspects. Her skepticism slowly morphed into intrigued professionalism. "Your existing lintel above the doorway will need significant reinforcement, likely a custom steel I-beam," she concluded, pointing to a diagram. "And we'll need to pour new concrete footings directly beneath the door jambs, extending down to the foundation to distribute the weight. It's ambitious, but doable." Music to my ears. While all this clandestine planning was underway, Patricia was not idle. Having received Carol's scathing cease and desist letter regarding the illegal lock change and unauthorized entry, which also demanded full reimbursement for my locksmith, the cost of the new high-security Medico locks, and hinted darkly at further legal action for damages and emotional distress, Patricia had initially gone quiet. Too quiet. Then came the next wave of violations, not from her directly at first. Instead, anonymous complaints started appearing in the HOA's online portal, which the board, led by Patricia, was obligated to investigate. My lawn was suddenly unevenly mowed. It wasn't. My driveway had a suspicious oil stain. It was a watermark from the rain. My recycling bin was improperly placed by a whole 6 inches on collection day. Each complaint was followed by an official-looking notice from the HOA, penned with Patricia's characteristic passive-aggressive venom, now laced with a veneer of wounded professionalism. "We are merely trying to uphold the standards that make Meadowbrook Gardens a desirable community for all," one letter pontificated, "and it is disheartening when certain residents exhibit such disregard for communal harmony."
Oh, the irony. She was trying to needle me, to bury me under an avalanche of petty grievances, hoping I'd crack or move out. She even tried to get my immediate neighbors to complain about me. But Mr. Thompson, bless his heart, told her to go fly a kite, and Mrs. Martinez next door, who had initially been intimidated by Patricia, found a new backbone after hearing about the lock incident, and told Patricia that my lack of decorative flair was far preferable to Patricia's lack of basic human decency.
Allies were emerging. Emboldened by Patricia's clear overreach, the most audacious move during this period was the emergency landscape review. Patricia, accompanied by two nervous-looking board members, her ever-loyal enablers, a mousy accountant named Gerald, and a woman whose main qualification seemed to be her ability to nod enthusiastically at everything Patricia said, appeared on my doorstep one Saturday morning. I was in my garage organising tools when I heard the peremptory knock. I opened the side door to see Patricia standing there, clipboard in hand, flanked by her acolytes. "Mr. Peterson," she announced, her voice overly bright, like a children's television presenter about to announce something deeply unpleasant. "We're conducting an emergency review of landscaping compliance. There have been concerns." "Concerns?" I asked, leaning against the door frame, deliberately not inviting them in. "About what precisely, Patricia? My petunias again? Or have the chickadees escalated their nefarious activities?" Gerald winced. Patricia's smile tightened. "This is no joking matter, Mr. Peterson. It has come to our attention that your property may be harbouring invasive plant species, potentially in violation of Section 4, Subsection B, Paragraph 7 of the revised landscaping bylaws." She actually cited a paragraph. I was almost impressed.
Invasive species? I looked around my meticulously kept and entirely native plant-focused front yard. I'd learned my petunia lesson aesthetically speaking, if not principally, such as Patricia consulted her clipboard with an air of great importance. "We have reports of unregulated dandelion growth near the rear perimeter." I stared at her. "Dandelions? That's your emergency?" "In my backyard, which was fenced and largely invisible from the street." "You want to inspect my backyard for dandelions, Patricia?" She puffed up. "It is the HOA's right and duty to ensure all properties are compliant. We require access to the rear of the property."
"No," I said simply. Her face mottled. "No? What do you mean, no? This is an official HOA inspection." "And this is private property," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "You are not coming into my backyard without a warrant or a court order, Patricia. Especially not after your last uninvited foray into my home. Your concerns about dandelions do not constitute an emergency that overrides my property rights. Put your concerns in writing as per the official grievance procedure you're so fond of, and I'll address them in writing." Gerald looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him. The other board member was suddenly fascinated by a loose thread on her blouse. Patricia, however, seemed to swell with indignation. "This is an outrage. You are obstructing an official investigation. I will have you know this will be noted in your file. Fines will be levied." "Levy away, Patricia," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "My lawyer Carol is getting quite a collection of your correspondence. She finds it very illuminating." The mention of Carol seemed to take some of the wind out of her sails. Her eyes narrowed, but she merely sniffed, made a theatrical note on her clipboard, and spun on her heel.
"You will be hearing from us, Mr. Peterson," she called back over her shoulder as she marched toward her tank-like SUV, her two flustered board members scurrying in her wake. This little encounter just solidified my resolve. The vault door wasn't just about preventing entry. It was about sending an unmistakable message. It was about drawing a line in concrete and steel. The logistics for the door installation were complex. Fortress Max Security Solutions was professional, but their quote was eye-watering, covering custom fabrication, reinforced crating, specialized heavy lift transportation, and a team of 4 installers who would need accommodation for the 3 days estimated for the job. Dr. Sharma, the structural engineer, coordinated with them on the reinforcement requirements. This involved pouring new deep concrete footings under the threshold and installing a massive steel I-beam above the doorframe, all tied into the existing structure. This preliminary work had to be done discreetly. I hired a local contractor, a friend of a friend sworn to secrecy, who framed it as essential foundation and lintel repairs due to settling.
We timed the noisiest parts for when Patricia was reliably at her Tuesday morning golf game. It was a tense period, a lot of money flying out of my account, a lot of coordination. I felt like I was orchestrating a covert operation. The door itself took 8 weeks to fabricate, 8 weeks of Patricia's escalating petty harassment, and my equally escalating anticipation. The day I got the call from Fortress Max that Project Sanctuary, as I'd codenamed it, was ready for shipping, I felt a surge of triumph. This was it. The ultimate non-compliant yet perfectly legal statement. I just hoped Patricia would pick the right day to come snooping again after it was installed. The arrival of the bank vault door was an event in itself. It came on a massive flatbed truck, cocooned in heavy-duty crating and draped in tarps, looking less like a household fixture and more like a decommissioned piece of military hardware. Marcus from Fortress Max and his three-man crew, all built like brick outhouses, were professionals to the core. They'd coordinated with a local heavy-lifting crane company, and the sight of my new front door being hoisted over my rooftop and carefully manoeuvred toward the gaping hole where my old door and its frame used to be drew a small crowd of curious neighbours. Mr. Thompson stood on his porch, jaw slack. Mrs. Martinez was filming it on her phone, a wide grin on her face. Even some of the residents I didn't know well were peeking out from behind their curtains. Patricia, thankfully, was nowhere to be seen. I'd specifically timed the most dramatic phase of the installation for a Wednesday afternoon, when she usually attended her advanced power networking for executive women, luncheon, or whatever equally self-important event she graced with her presence. The installation process was a symphony of controlled power and precision engineering. The new reinforced steel door frame, which had been delivered and set a few days prior during the foundation work, was a beast in itself. Bolted and welded into the reinforced lintel and concrete footings Dr. Sharma had designed. The vault door itself, once uncrated, was a thing of brutalist beauty. Gleaming raw, burnished steel nearly a foot thick, with the intricate workings of the Sergeant Greenleaf combination lock visible on its inner face before the final cover plate went on. The circular crank handle looked like it belonged on a submarine hatch. It slid into the frame with a surprisingly gentle whoosh, guided by the crane and Marcus's expert crew, settling into place with a satisfying, definitive thud that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of the house. The installers worked for 3 days, meticulously fitting, welding, calibrating. They were unfailingly polite, explaining to my awestruck neighbours who wandered over that it was a custom high-security installation. No one asked too many questions. The sheer presence of the door seemed to command a certain respectful silence. The cost was, as anticipated, astronomical. It ate up a significant chunk of my savings, but every time I imagined Patricia's face when she first encountered it, I considered it an investment in long-term peace and exquisite schadenfreude. While the door was clearly industrial, Fortress Max had done a surprisingly good job with the external finish. It was a dark, brushed graphite that, while undeniably formidable, didn't look entirely out of place with my home's modern, somewhat minimalist architecture. Or so I told myself. Who was I kidding? It looked like a bank had crash-landed into a suburban street, and it was magnificent. The first time I spun that big, heavy wheel and heard the massive bolts slide home with a series of satisfying clunks, I felt a profound sense of security I hadn't realised I'd been missing so acutely. This wasn't just a door. It was a statement of intent. It said, "My home is my castle, and you, madam, are definitively not invited." Of course, I knew the real test was yet to come. Patricia couldn't stay away forever. Her obsession with my non-compliance was too deeply ingrained. Carol, my lawyer, had advised me to install a high-definition security camera with good audio capture focused on my front porch, just in case. I'd taken her advice, opting for a discreet model that blended into the new reinforced door frame. It was primed and ready. It took another week. I went about my business, enjoying the quiet solidity of my new entryway. I even started working out a plausible explanation for any curious official inquiries, something about rising concerns over local security and a proactive approach to asset protection. Not that any official inquiries ever came, beyond the bewildered admiration of the pizza delivery guy. Then one Tuesday morning, as I was enjoying a cup of coffee and reviewing some schematics for a work project, my security camera app pinged my phone with a live feed notification. And there she was, Patricia Wellington, in all her glory, marching up my driveway. She was wearing a particularly obnoxious lemon-yellow pantsuit, clutching her ever-present clipboard. She had Gerald, the mousy accountant, trailing in her wake, looking even more uncomfortable than usual. This was it, showtime. I watched on my monitor, a grimly satisfied smile on my face. Patricia reached my front porch. She stopped. She blinked, her perfectly coiffed head tilted as if trying to process an optical illusion. I could almost see the error messages scrolling behind her eyes. She took a hesitant step closer, peering at the expanse of brushed graphite steel, the formidable circular handle, the glint of the combination lock. Gerald bumped into her from behind, not looking where he was going, his eyes also wide with disbelief. Patricia slowly reached out, a perfectly manicured finger laden with several large gaudy rings, and tentatively poked the door as if to confirm it was real. I could hear her faintly through the camera's microphone. What in the Sam Hill is that? She muttered, her voice a stunned whisper.
Gerald, equally flabbergasted, just mumbled something incoherent. Patricia recovered some of her usual bluster. She straightened her lemon-yellow jacket, rapped sharply on the door with her knuckles. It made a dull, unsatisfying thud against the thick steel. "Mr. Peterson, this is Chairwoman Wellington. Open this door immediately. We are here for a scheduled follow-up compliance review."
I sipped my coffee. I wasn't moving. Let her stew. She rapped again, harder this time, then grabbed the massive circular handle and tried to turn it. It didn't budge, of course. It was designed to resist considerably more than Patricia's indignation. "Mr. Peterson," she shrieked, her voice escalating in pitch and volume. "This is an official HOA matter. You are required to grant us access. What have you done to your doorway?" She was practically